Where Winds Meet is probably my most anticipated RPG still left for 2025. It brings an interesting twist on the MMO genre because it's not actually purely MMO, the single player content here is huge and very important to progression. And since it handles a lot of the systems and mechanics in a rather unique way, here are some of the most important things you should know before playing. And this offers a great segue into our first point, where Winds Meet is not your typical MMO. Rather, it offers both a solo and an online mode that you can freely swap between at almost any time, with each being useful for certain aspects of progression. So solo play is what you start with from the very beginning of the game. As the name implies, its main focus is on the single player experience. What this means is that during solo play is how you will follow the main story, most of the side quests and mini games, and it's where you will spend the majority of your time, at least early on. In this mode, you will encounter a few other players, however, it does leave room for party co-op with up to 3 other players, so it is possible to tackle the same missions if you want to play with your friends in this mode. Online play, on the other hand, unlocks a bit later, and it offers access to the same map, but with a few key differences. One of which is that the main story and side quests will no longer be available to you, they simply disappear from the map. Instead, this mode will focus more on MMO-style activities such as guilds, PvP battles, group dungeons, and even open-world boss raids, among quite a few more on top. But the map will also fill with a lot more players that you're going to get to encounter who also chose to play the same mode as you. For the highest endgame loot though and resources, this is the place you're going to eventually jump into as you get higher and higher levels with your character. But because of the nature of progression in Where Winds Meet, you will likely swap between the two modes quite often on your way to max level. At number 2 is something I should have probably started with earlier, but that's going to be the pricing model. Where Winds Meet is completely free to play and instead will offer in-game purchases primarily focused on cosmetics and battle passes. Not all cosmetics though, as some of them can be acquired by in-game means such as specific side quests or unlocked by completing special achievements and challenges. In fact, even the ones that do require special currencies can be acquired since playing the game also rewards some of these currencies, albeit at a slower pace. For everything else, there is an in-game shop with offers refreshing periodically, plus the game features battle pass systems, both free and paid ones. So even if you chose not to buy it this season, for example, you can still make progress and earn rewards even as a completely free-to-play user. At number 3, we gotta talk about the game setting. Where Winds Meet is an open-world action RPG set in a wuxia world. In other words, it focuses on themes such as martial arts, chivalry, and heroic deeds. Set in 10th century China during the turbulent 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms era, you'll get to play as a young swordmaster, forging your own destiny as you uncover forgotten truths and the mysteries of your own identity. As you probably noticed from the previews, the open world is large and vibrant, featuring over 20 regions with different biomes, from small villages to lush forests, vistas, rice fields, all the way to historically inspired cities like the Kaifeng, plus many more underground dungeons, hidden caverns with more content to discover. From what I played so far, almost every single place I visited had its own backstories and assortment of important side quests, minigames, and even vendors to interact with. In fact, many of the strongest abilities are unlocked via side quests or other similar means, not all of which are easy to discover, mind you, at first glance, and will require a bit of lore reading. Which brings us to number 4, and that's going to be Traversal. One of the most interesting aspects about this game is that you're not just bound to typical open world movement, such as running, horse riding, and fast traveling. There's actually quite a lot more to it. Of course, we still have our parkour system, triple jumping, air dashes, and wall running, which themselves are very fun and enjoyable to play with. However, by far my favorites are what's essentially called lightness skills, abilities that let you soar through the skies like a literal god. Abilities such as Meteor Flight and Fan Glider, some of which you get to unlock quite early on, let you roam through the skies and over the mountains once you meet the proper requirements. And they're so fun and interactive to play with that you're likely going to use them on every occasion, especially since the map is actually pretty big. There's also a water running skill that kinda doubles as a super sprint. I also love this, and it just makes traversal a lot easier, especially over the game's many lakes and rivers. Speaking of which, Where Winds Meet is an action RPG, and it puts a huge emphasis on action combat. Full disclaimer here, it is going to take some time to get used to it, especially as a newcomer. While it's easy to pick up, the ceiling to master it is actually quite high. Plus, there are multiple difficulty settings, including a hardcore one that will really put your abilities to the test. But combat puts a big emphasis on perfect dodging, blocking, and perfect parries, all three of which are on their own separate buttons. So while blocking is good at generally mitigating some of the incoming damage, perfect parries completely remove all of that incoming damage for that attack and even deal massive posture damage back at the enemy. This requires almost perfect timing and learning the enemy's moveset, but the payoffs can be huge. Once the target's entire posture bar has been completely broken, this leaves them completely stunned for a relatively long time and even lets you follow up with a devastating finisher that rips off massive chunks of their HP. Meanwhile, perfect dodges provide a massive slow time that lasts for a rather long time, which makes it very good against large groups of enemies or when you need to set up a longer combo. All in all, this is something you're going to have to get used to, learn enemies' movesets, and eventually get better at it via simple practice. As such, at number 6, we've got to talk about weapons. The global launch of Where Winds Meet will feature 8 from the base game, with possibly more to come from the Chinese version in the future. So the ones I've noticed include swords, twin blades, spears, fans, umbrellas, rope darts, mow blades, and finally bows, but only 2 can be equipped at any given moment. Most of these are unlocked via side content, including activities where you literally have to actively learn their moveset by spying on the very masters that practice them. Don't be fooled by the number of weapon categories though. There are multiple choices even within each one of them that fit distinctive roles. Some may be aimed towards DPS, other tanking, other range damage, and others may even be suited for healing. For example, the Stormbreaker Spear is more aimed towards a tanky playstyle, meanwhile the Nameless Spear is more suited for DPS, despite both belonging to the same spear category. But other types have this too, such as fans and umbrellas having options both for range DPS and healing or buffing. And very important to maximizing your build's potential is how you make these weapons synergize with one another. Many of the skills from specific weapons may provide useful buffs or other benefits that empower the skills of other weapons. Just to give you a couple of examples, the Stormbreaker Spear empowers one of the Thundercry's blade skills via the Drum Beast buff, making it a lot stronger. Or the Healing Fan and Umbrella having their martial arts synergize, providing more damage towards that, plus better healing effects when you have both of them equipped on your build. There are many more such synergies in the game, so if you want to see a bigger breakdown coming out on the channel, make sure to subscribe if you want to find out more. But moving on to number 7, we have character progression. And while there isn't a class system per se here, there is a deep progression system at play here around multiple different types of abilities, skill trees, and many more upgrades on top that you can unlock. So we're gonna cover some of the more important ones, starting with the martial arts. This is the first and most important of the categories, and these are combat skills directly tied to your equipped weapons. So once you study them, you also get access to the weapon category that they belong to. Not only do you get to level martial arts here, but they even feature their own skill trees with even more bonuses and effects to become much stronger. This means it's possible to eventually master all weapons, albeit it will take quite a bit of time and resource investment. Next, we have internal arts, which are more or less passives that provide extra benefits in combat, such as damage buffs, healing, resource generation, and other useful combat effects. They generally tend to interact with martial arts, but aren't limited just to that. Oftentimes, there are other actions that will trigger their special effects, so you will oftentimes want to actually mix and match these perfectly to the type of weapons and actions you perform the most. As a result, they are also critical to your build synergy. Besides this, we also have mystic arts, and you can think of them as special active abilities separate from those belonging to your weapons. So these are skills that can use stuff like fire breathing, drunken fist, special AoE debuffs, and so on that you can unlock via side quests and other secret interactions. Some excel in single target DPS, others at AoE, others at debuffing targets or providing buffs to your own character in combat. Not all of them are combat related though, so a lot of them can be used at solving open world puzzles, for example, such as freezing somebody in a specific pose to help you unlock locked mechanisms and such. They cost spirit though, which you can generate in combat or replenish at hero stones all across the map. All of these you're free to slot in and out, further deepening your build diversity. And finally, we've got talents. As your character levels up, it's going to gain skill points, which you can then invest into your own dedicated talent tree. And while mostly it's comprised out of passive benefits, a lot of these benefits are actually in fact very strong, such as unlocking more slots for more mystic art for you to use in combat. But there are many more on top, including extra passive skills to your damage, HP, critical chance, and so on, all of which will eventually be useful. But jumping up to number 8, we've gotta talk about immersion. My first time playing this game, I was surprised how many side activities relate just to immersion. One of which is internal healing. As you get involved into fights, your character can genuinely suffer long-term damage, including sprains, body injuries, even curses, and other debilitating effects. The other day, for example, my character had a broken leg that I had forgotten to heal for a few in-game weeks, which eventually ended up in making me permanently crippled until another player healed me. So there's a whole game section dedicated to joining jobs like becoming a healer or a scholar, in which you can also help out NPCs as well as other players. The minigame involved here is also quite thoughtful. It's almost like a card minigame during which you quite literally have to battle the illness with different effects that either damage it or protect your character for some hefty rewards to be won as you pursue this playstyle. In fact, jobs like these have very deep progression systems that you can level up through for more powerful effects later on. And while we're on the subject of immersion, another aspect I've appreciated is that you can literally befriend NPCs in this game. And there are a couple of ways in which you can do that. There is a dialogue minigame that also works this way. But in one of the early betas I played, also AI was at play and it actually functioned really well. So in this, you could have legit conversations with some of the NPCs in the game, like merchants and other important characters. And depending what you conversed with them, they would actually give a response depending on the type of NPC it was and the type of lifestyle they led. So for example, you would have a completely different conversation and types of answers from somebody who was a merchant compared to somebody who was a fisherman or even a warrior. The AI also did a good job at following those specific parameters, never to break character. Plus, you can interact with this in such a way that it actually leads to side objectives. Like, for example, a character requesting to, for example, buy them some kind of meal, and depending how you converse with them, you can inquire more about how you can find that meal, and they will even tell you why they actually enjoy it that much. And that's just one of the examples I've noticed. But let's also jump to number 9, and that's going to be character creation. I know I should have probably covered this a little bit sooner, but it goes without saying that Where Winds Meet lets you create some very good looking characters with a very deep set of settings for pretty much every feature you can think of. But for somebody like me who has a long way to go in terms of really making characters that stand out, I was also happy to notice a character import tool as well being present here, with a lot of presets that other players have created and shared. So if you're out of inspiration, you can just check some of these really cool designs others have made and then further customize them to your own liking. Photo mode also further takes advantage of this with a high degree of customization here as well, especially if you're somebody who enjoys screen archery. Even this mode has scene presets that others have made and shared, which includes things like character pose, camera angles, and scene composition to perfectly mimic that of professional screenshots that somebody else have made. And finally, to number 10, this brings us to the end game. Where Winds Meet has something for everybody, from PvE to PvP, from solo to social gathering style content. There are many ways in which you can play this game in. PvE endgame mostly revolves around dungeons, raids, and open world bosses. Dungeons are typically instance group activities for either 4 or up to 10 players and are the primary source for high-end loot, especially later on. World bosses, on the other hand, as the name implies, will spawn in the open world hubs. These typically don't have a restriction when it comes to forming up parties or not, but they can definitely be a lot more dangerous. PvP on the other hand involves both 1v1 duels, ranked arenas, battle royales, guild wars, and bounties. Some of these are more reliant on skill, while in others, gear plays a much bigger role. So balance modes like 1v1 and 3v3 arenas, where stats are minimized, means personal skill competence is a much bigger factor at winning. Whereas in other modes, the better your gear is compared to that of your foes, the higher your chances of success are. The first are quite self-explanatory too, however bounties can also be put on players' heads. Should you commit enough crimes in single player, such as taking down innocent NPCs, can result in others invading your single player world to collect the rewards on your head. On top of this, players can also join guilds, especially if you want to work towards a collective goal, share resources, and take part in larger scale exclusive activities. And yes, if you were wondering, a lot of these, both PvE and PvP activities, do feature matchmaking as well. Overall, it's easy to sink hundreds of hours into a game like this, given the sheer number of ways you can enjoy it in. For now though, that about covers the majority of the most important things you should know before coming out and playing in a few more days. As always, if you enjoyed this video at any point, a thumbs up would definitely help a ton. Also don't forget to subscribe and activate the bell button, and I'll see you guys in the next video.